Nice to see you. I'm Erik Ruin. This is Maryann Colella. It's nice to be back in Baltimore. I lived here in the late 90s for a moment. I like this place. People talk shit, but I'm from Detroit. So. Yeah, we're on tour. I live in Providence. Maryann pretty much lives in Vermont. And it is great to be here. This show is called One Touch of Nature Makes the Whole World Kin. And it's based on a book by Rebecca Solnit entitled A Paradise Built in Hell, which I highly recommend picking up. Most of the text is taken from there. And I think that's it. Without further ado, if we can just kill the 2 lights left in the house. At 9:12 in the morning on April 18th, 1906, about a minute of seismic shaking tore up San Francisco, toppling buildings, collapsing chimneys, breaking water mains and gas lines, twisting streetcar tracks, even tipping headstones into cemeteries.
Came the fires.
Nearly 5 square miles, more than 28,000 structures were incinerated. In the days after the earthquake, more than 17,000 Army troops were joined by members of the Navy, the Marines, the California National Guard, and military cadets.
These forces were deployed to prevent things that often existed largely in their imaginations.
Brigadier General Frederick Funston wrote,
I have no doubt that had it not been for the prompt arrival of the large force of regular troops who are acting under order to shoot all looters, the saloons would have been broken into, and then the crowd, becoming turbulent, would have begun sacking the banks and jewelry stores. San Francisco's mayor, Eugene Schmatz, issued a proclamation which read,
the federal troops, the members of the regular police force, and all special police officers have been authorized by me to kill any and all persons found engaging in looting or in the commission of any other crime.
One man was seen picking over the rubble. The discoverer fired a warning shot. The man ran, and a soldier shot him dead. He had been trying to free somebody trapped in the rubble.
The Army tried many reckless experiments in using explosives to make fire breaks. One was the use of black powder in the place of dynamite. The former simply blows things up, while the latter tends also to ignite them. Thus, many buildings were turned into burning, flying brands that spread the fire farther, or started new conflagrations entirely. Perhaps most important was keeping away from the flames the public, who might have supplied the power to fight the fire by hand. Many of the most successful firefighting efforts were by groups of citizens armed with buckets of water, with shovels, with wet gunny sacks, with whatever came to hand. Jerome Baker Landfield lived at the north end of the city, and he wrote afterward,
Water was lacking, but the proprietress of a little grocery at Larkin and Greenwich Streets gave us 2 barrels of vinegar, and a score of volunteers armed with blankets soaked in vinegar extinguished flaming cinders on neighboring rooftops. By 11 o'clock, we believed that the rest of our district was out of danger.
Charles Reddy, the manager of Miller & Lux, one of the big slaughterhouses on the city's southeastern shore, also tells of the open-handedness that sprang up in the hours and days of the disaster. Reddy said,
My first thought that morning was that homeless people would soon be wanting meat, and my straight orders were to give every applicant all he needed and take money from nobody.
Black, white, and yellow were to be treated just the same, even if we had all Chinatown camped down quite near us.
At the end of the earthquake, we had on hand, slaughtered and ready for delivery, about 300 head of cattle,
500 or 600 sheep,
500 or 600 sheep, 30
or 40 calves,
and about
150 hogs. None of this meat was lost or destroyed. Every bit of it was distributed to the people, and the supply lasted for 7 days.
The 2 firms that did not open up their warehouses had all their meat rot on their hands. Mrs. Anna Amelia Holshouser camped out in Union Square until the flames came close and the soldiers drove her onward. Like thousands of others, she ended up trudging with her bundles to Golden Gate Park. She stitched together blankets, carpets, and sheets to make a tent that sheltered 22 people, including 13 children. And Holshouser started a tiny soup kitchen with 1 tin can to drink from and 1 pie plate to eat from. But she was soon feeding 200 to 300 people a day. They baptized it the Mizpah Cafe. Ornamental letters spelled out,
One touch of nature makes the whole world kin. All over the city, stoves were hauled out of damaged buildings or built out of rubble, and people commenced to cook for each other. Camps and street-side shelters with names like
the Palace Hotel,
the Appetite Killery,
the House of Mirth,
the Oyster Loaf. A menu chalked on the door of Camp Necessity included the items:
Flea's eyes, raw, 98 cents. Pickled eels, nails fried, 13 cents. Fly's legs on toast, 9 cents. Rainwater fritters with umbrella sauce, $9.10. Despite all the death and destruction, or perhaps because of it, the people were for the most part calm and cheerful, and many survived the earthquake with gratitude and generosity. Edwin Emerson recalled that after the quake,
when the tents of the refugees and the funny street kitchens improvised from doors and shutters and pieces of roofing, overspread all the city. Such merriment became an accepted thing. Everywhere during those long moonlit evenings, one could hear the tinkle of guitars and mandolins from among the tents. Or passing by the grotesque rows of curbstone kitchens, one became dimly aware of the low murmurings of couples who had sought refuge in those dark recesses, as in bowers of love. The overworked marriage clerk has deposed that the fees collected by him for issuing such licenses during April and May of 1906 far exceeded the totals for the same months of any preceding years in San Francisco.
First came the boatswain of our ship, with courage stout and bold. Stand fast, brave, lively land. Stand fast, brave hearts of gold. Up then spoke our cabin boy. Oh, well spoke boy was he. I'm sorry for my mother. I'm lost in the salt sea. Oh, last night, the moon shone bright. Know that she had some spark. Tonight she will look in the salt softly and find but alive, and find but alive. For boats, you fair Plymouth girl, don't you hear how the trumpet sounds? For the want of a boat, our good ship is lost, and most of the young men drowned, oh drowned, and most of the young men drowned. On the morning of December 6th, 1917, a Norwegian ship, the Emo, draped with a Belgian relief banner, had taken an unorthodox course, as if to pass the munitions ship, the Mont Blanc, on the wrong side in the long, narrow channel of the sheltered Halifax harbor. The Mont Blanc signaled frantically, but the two ships were unable to agree on a safe passage past each other. The Emo steamed on fast and plowed into the Mont Blanc, tearing into the side of the ship. Tonight she will look in the salt softly and find but one alive, and find but one alive. For boats, you fair Plymouth girl, don't you hear how the trumpets sound? For the want of a boat, our good ship is lost, and the most of the young men drowned, oh drowned, and the most of the young men drowned.
The Mont Blanc was laden with nearly 3,000 tons of explosive powder, along with highly flammable gun oil, gun cotton, benzol, and pyrrhic acid. The impact ignited some of the cargo, and the fire spread to some of the most volatile material. The ship drifted toward the shore, 100-foot flames clawing the sky, And then the nearly 3,000 tons of explosives detonated. The explosion lifted the entire 6 million pounds of the Mont Blanc 1,000 feet into the air, vaporized much of it, and dropped a shower of white-hot shrapnel over Halifax. A cloud of white smoke rose 20,000 feet into the sky. The ship's anchor shank, weighing half a ton, was thrown 2 miles.
The barrel of a large ship-mounted gun flew nearly 3.5 miles. Anybody seen a small boat? No boat?
Water was sucked up into a column and then dropped again into the torrential wave that overswept the surroundings, rising nearly 60 feet beyond the high water level. What remained of the benzol mixed with a cloud of water to form a sticky black rain that fell on both sides of the harbor for several minutes.
Every building within a mile was destroyed, and many further away were shattered or ignited.
A sound wave shot out, and the sound was audible for more than 200 miles away.
1,630
Air blast rolled over the city,
buildings
knocking down
annihilated,
buildings, tearing through
and
doors, windows,
12,000
and walls,
damaged.
crushing the bodies of those who were head-on nearby.
More than 1,500 people were killed, leaving
Exploding
behind
eardrums
widows,
and lungs,
widowers,
lifting people and hurling them into whatever was
orphans,
nearby,
and
or carrying them away,
parents.
snapping trees and telephone poles
Nearly
like twigs,
9,000 people were injured, and ultimately 41 adults and children
reducing
were
whole
blinded.
neighborhoods to splinters and rubble.
Houses were smashed into piles of splinters.
And people were trapped or crushed underneath.
The rain of black grease covered most of the people out of doors,
Making them unrecognizable to family members who met them on the streets
in the hospitals.
or found them in the impromptu morgues. 6-year-old Dorothy Lloyd was walking to school that morning with her 3 sisters when a woman ran toward them, hair flying back, shouting.
Go back! Go back!
They saw a mountain of smoke in the sky, stopped in their tracks, and were thrown to the ground by the force of the explosion.
Dolly, look at the stovepipes flying in the air.
Her sister corrected her. Those aren't stovepipes. They're sailors. The overnight express train, number 10 from New Brunswick, 300 passengers aboard, was spared because a railroad dispatcher, Vincent Coleman, rushed back into the telegraph office near the harbor, despite the mortal danger, to send a warning and a farewell up the tracks.
Hold up the train. Munitions ship on fire and will explode. Guess this will be my last message. Goodbye, boys. Money, supplies, and volunteers came from around the world. In the terrible weather, finding shelter was urgent. People sheltered from the snow in boxcars, in army tents, in the intact room or two that remained of their houses, behind boarded-up windows. Residents in the surrounding countryside and towns across Nova Scotia took in many. Halifax native Laura MacDonald writes, English Protestant mothers who would not have stepped foot in Richmond suddenly welcomed poor Irish Catholic children to live in their homes. Whole families were invited to live in the parlors of wealthier citizens. Halifax, with its rigid structure divided by religion, class, and country, briefly integrated.
Or greater drought, and 47% of the state was in an exceptional drought. The hurricane with 8 miles per hour winds made a second landfall on Long Island, and amounts that is likely to rise 65 miles per hour winds.
Irene roared ashore over the outer banks of North Carolina on August 27th, 2011, as a Category 1 hurricane with 80 miles per hour winds.
Recovery.
Major coastal damage resulted from the hurricane's outer banks, isolating the barrier islands from the mainland. However, the main damage from Irene occurred due to the storm's heavy rains of 8 to 12 inches that fell over much of the Northeast. Record flooding hit rivers in New Jersey, New York, Vermont, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut.
And 2 storms that dumped massive amounts of rain in the Mississippi watershed in April. The Mississippi was in for a flood of record proportions. The river began to bulge by the beginning of May, flooding every state from Illinois to Louisiana and Mississippi. The river began to bulge by the
Montana and Wyoming this past winter, over 200% of average, which continue to be felt along the Missouri River. Bridges closed, making it impossible to cross the river for 100 miles at a time in some places.
Shore to shore over the outer banks of North Carolina on August 27, 2011, as a Category 1 hurricane, 85 miles. Every 22nd landfall.
is of Greek origin. Meaning a point of culmination and separation. An instant when change, one way or another, is impending. Life becomes like molten metal. It enters a state of flux from which it resets upon a principle, a creed, or a purpose. It is shaken, perhaps violently, out of rut and routine. Old customs crumble,